January 1990. It's a brand new year. I'm still in Iceland, protecting our country from communism, and I'm going to save my Icelandic anecdote for a little bit later because it ties into something from this list of books that I read in January of 1990. Let's get started. Hold on a second. I was not fully prepared. I have some books over here that just a few that I can show you. And the first one is The Cat Who Went Underground by Lillian Jackson Braun, if that's how you say her name. And in this one, Jim Quillerin and his two Siamese cats go on vacation to a cabin in Moose County, I believe it is, and dead bodies start popping up. There might be a serial killer, and the cats are going to help Jim solve the mystery. Just a nice little cozy mystery, part of a series I've read a lot of. Let's toss that aside. Next up, we have Wishbringer by Craig Shaw Gardner. This is about a con man named Simon who goes to a city called Festeron, or a land, something. I don't know. There's magic. He's got to fight against witches and ogres and other creatures. It's just a lighthearted fantasy novel from a pretty good author, Craig Shaw Gardner. We're going to see him again shortly. Number 3, People of the Lie by M. Scott Peck, M.D. This is the guy that wrote The Road Less Traveled. This book is about evil. People who are evil. I think he has some anecdotes or whatever you want to call it from some of the people in his practice. Of course, names are changed, all that good stuff. But he's simply talking about people being evil and committing evil and why and how to combat it. Little slice of nonfiction. Number 4. Man, we're just ripping along right here. Shogun by James Clavell. Clavell, however you say his name. Of course, this is the book on which the classic made-for-TV miniseries was based. And our main character is an Englishman named John. I'm looking at my notes, obviously. John Blackthorne, who is lost at sea, ends up in Japan, 17th century Japan, and has to basically navigate as a foreigner in a land where not a lot of English people have been at the time. He's got to, learn the customs and the language and all that stuff. And the one thing I remember the most from this book was that the natives wanted Mr. Blackthorne to bathe, and it was a foreign concept to the Englishman. So that was interesting. But it's a huge, fat, thick book. I enjoyed it. I remember enjoying it. I loved the miniseries. I'm interested in Japanese history, so it was a good book to read. Next up, I'm not counting anymore. Skin Tight by Carl Hyacin, or however you say his name. This is, you've got this guy, Mike Stranahan. I must have forgotten the letter when I wrote it down. He was a state investigator in Florida. We start with somebody breaking into his house trying to murder him. And he he kills the murderer, the intruder, with a stuffed marlin. And then there's no ID on the guy. So somebody's trying to kill this retired state investigator. It could be one of any number of suspects, enemies he made. So he's trying to figure out who. He's trying to stay alive. I remember this book being very, very funny. One of my favorites from Carl Hyacin. A lot of laugh out loud moments. Then we have Slaves of the Volcano God by Craig Shaw Gardner. And our main character is Roger Gordon. Roger Gordon. He's a PR man. And one day he's playing around with his Captain Crusader decoder ring and realizes that it is a magical item that can transport him into the Cineverse, I believe it's called. Basically, he's going into all these B movies and having crazy adventures. And it's the first in a trilogy. I think there were only 3. And now, my anecdote from Iceland. I had a friend up there, one of the guys I worked with, who was a budding filmmaker. I had a camera it was exciting. It had a floating head. So, like when he paused, if he was recording something and he paused and then he started recording again, it was almost seamless. It was amazing. But he was always making little short films, little comedy things. He even made a short film based on a story that I came up with. I got credit at the end. I was in the end credits. But anyway, he was a fan of these Craig Shaw Gardner books as well. And so one day I was sitting in the NCO club, just hanging out. He was walking around with his camera, and he came over and he was like, "Hey, let's film something. I'm going to film you sitting there. I want you to act like you're turning a ring on your finger and say, 'See you in the funny papers,'" which was the thing that, what's-his-name, Roger Gordon had to say to make the decoder ring work. He's like, "Then I'm going to pause the film, and you get up and move, and then we'll start recording, and it'll look like you disappeared." So we did that, and it looked really cool. So this was long before YouTube. I have no idea if any of the stuff he recorded still exists in any way. I don't even remember the guy's name, or I'd look him up and see if he went on to become a filmmaker or what he did with his life. But anyway, it was fun, and watching the playback, it was kind of cool. I'm sitting there in the chair, and then all of a sudden I'm gone. It was neat. It was fun. We did crazy things like that in Iceland, because what else are you going to do in Iceland? Anyway, all right, let's move on. That was Slaves of the Volcano God, Craig Shaw Gardner. Next up, we have Usher's Passing by Robert R. McCammon. Love these covers. So this is sequel to The Fall of the House of Usher. It's been so long since I've read it. I think it's technically a sequel. The House of Usher was a real place, and it's now this giant corporation that's creating weapons of mass destruction and calling up demons or something. Yeah, summoning demons. And people are trying to stop them. Just reading the back of this before I started recording makes me want to jump in and read this again. Because it's been a long time. This might be the only time I read it. I don't know. But Usher's Passing, Robert R. McCammon. Next up, The Mask by Dean R. Koontz. We're going to see a lot more Dean Koontz coming up here while I was in Iceland. But The Mask, where are my notes? So Paul and Carol Tracy find this teenage girl named Jane standing in the middle of the freeway, in danger. They take her in. She has no memory of who she is, but as soon as they take her in, horrifying shenanigans start. I don't remember much about it. I had to take notes. So there you go. This was followed by Shattered by Dean R. Koontz. And this is, I did not have to take notes, so I may get this wrong, but basically this family is moving cross country. The wife, I believe, has gone ahead. The husband and the kid are packing up, doing the final stuff, and then they're going to drive cross country to meet the wife. There's some guy that's obsessed with the wife, doesn't know where she's gone, so he's following the husband and son and terrorizing them so he can get to the wife. That's how I remember it. This was, years ago, the first Dean Koontz book I ever read. I did not like it at all, and so I didn't read another Dean Koontz until Watchers came out, and that made me a Dean Koontz fan for a while. So at this point, I had decided to read Shattered again. Maybe I was in the wrong mood the first time I read it. I'm really digging everything I've read by Dean Koontz. Since then, nope, still did not like it. It just did nothing for me, and I hated the ending. All right, so next up, we have Time Wars by Jeremy Rifkin. I threw an extra letter in there. And this is about biological clocks. It's just about nature, biological clocks, and apparently about the dangers of computer artificial environments because they mess up the natural rhythm of life. Something like that. I remember nothing about it. That's followed by Silver Canyon by Louis L'Amour. And our main character is Matt Brennan. He's drifted into a place called Hatton's Point. There's some sort of conflict going on. He's going to get involved. He's going to fall in love with a woman. It's typical Western kind of thing. I mean, that's a lot of Westerns have that plot. Drifter comes in. There's a conflict in town. They get caught in the middle. Louis L'Amour is considered one of the masters of the Western. He's fine. Not my favorite Western author, but not horrible either. Then we have Poodle Springs by Raymond Chandler and Robert B. Parker. So when Raymond Chandler died, creator of Philip Marlowe, one of the greatest private detectives ever, there were, I think, when I looked this up, he had 5 chapters written for this novel. And then he passed away. So decades later, it was passed on to Robert B. Parker, creator of Spencer, one of the greatest private detectives around. And I believe he wrote like his thesis or something on Raymond Chandler or Philip Marlowe. I think I've read that in one of his biographies, or a biography about him, author by, I don't know. Anyway, so Robert B. Parker finished this Raymond Chandler novel. Philip Marlowe, at this point, is married to this rich woman, living in the lap of luxury, but he's still Philip Marlowe, so he's still a hard-boiled detective guy, and he's going to get involved in murder and mystery. And it's a really good book. I'm a big fan of Raymond Chandler. I'm a big fan of Robert B. Parker. I don't think Parker tries to ape Chandler's style. Chandler, I think, his prose was a little thicker than the way that Robert B. Parker writes, and I feel, if I remember correctly, that this was more in the style of Parker. He wasn't trying to ape or copy what Raymond Chandler does. But anyway, if you're a fan of any of these people I've mentioned, it's definitely a book worth reading. We're almost at the end. Next up, this is going to be interesting. Advanced Rhinocerology by Scott Alexander. This is a nonfiction book. I remembered nothing about it. So, as usual, when I don't remember what I'm talking about, what I read, I looked it up on Amazon. They had the book, no description. So then I went to Goodreads. And there was not really a description, just some information. So I went to the reviews. So this is a self-help book. I think it's tongue-in-cheek. I don't know for sure. But looking at the reviews, this is a book that would not fly today. It is very... the one review said it's very the anti-government part might fly, but it's very pro-police, pro-military. It's very, essentially, it says that if you have drive, if you are a hard worker trying to advance, that you're a rhino and everybody else is cows. You can become the CEO of a company if you're a rhino. Otherwise, you're a cow. One, I think, said it might be a little misogynistic. It just seems very... I was going to say initially conservative, but the anti-government part, is that a conservative trait or not? I don't know. I guess it depends. We shouldn't lump everybody together. But anyway, this is supposed to be a self-help book. Don't know. Don't remember if it was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, but it definitely sounds like something that would get a whole lot of flack today. And then finally, the last book is Mystery Walk by Robert R. McCammon. Another one of those lovely covers. And this has been in one of these videos before, so this is probably just the second time that I read it, and it's good versus evil, two forces fighting each other, but then they have to come together to fight an even greater threat. Again, it's been a long time since I've read it. Reading the back makes me want to read it again. I could easily never buy another book and probably die before I finished reading all the stuff I haven't read yet that I own. But I'd love to throw in, I want to reread stuff, but there's so much new stuff to read. Anyway, it's Robert McCammon. You know it's going to be good. So there we go. I finished off with something great. Finished the month. So there you go. How many books was that? Let me see. That looks like 11, 12, 13, 14 books. Does that sound about right? Is that how many books I named? And what a mix. Nonfiction, horror, western, fantasy, mystery. The only thing I don't see is science fiction. Although Slaves of the Volcano God has a science fiction element to it. I mean, the guy's jumping to different B-movie worlds. So at least one's got to be a science fiction-y type place. Yeah, some good stuff. So there you have it. That is January 1990. Little heads up, not nearly as many books coming up in February. But anyway, so if you have any comments, questions, or corrections, put them in the comments below. Let's see, do I have a question, a discussion issue for this video? Do you read nonfiction? And if you do, what subjects do you like to read about? There you go, we can talk about that. I like reading about all sorts of different subjects, as you can see, and as you will see in the future. There's going to be all sorts of stuff, as a matter of fact, coming up in February. Something a little wild. So, are you into nonfiction? What types of nonfiction books do you like to read? That's our discussion question. So please like, share, and subscribe. If you'd care to follow me on other social media, my Twitter is @Ronin5757. And my Instagram, where I post pictures of books, comics, board games, and fuzzy animals, occasionally some other stuff. That Instagram is ErikSmith5757. That's Eric with a K, ERIKSMITH 5757. That's all I've got this time, so until next time, read more books.